Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 450, Bottle Rocket, directed by Wes Anderson, 1996. This was the film that basically started his career. Now, let's see. The story itself is about three friends, one of them who has ambitions and believes he could have been a contender. They pull off these little heists, and it's all part of on the part of this one Dignan, played by Owen Wilson. Part of his 75-year plan. This is a man who's full of ambition and has some ideas of how he wants to do, but over the course of it, you start to find that reality doesn't always play out according to dreams. In part of the story, another friend of his, Anthony, played by Luke Wilson, after successfully pulling off a big heist of a small bookstore, they decide to then live on the lam. It's like, okay, we've done this thing, and now we're going to kind of lay low a bit. And they go to this hotel, and Anthony falls in love with one of the housekeepers, Inez, and they start a relationship, and then eventually kind of breaks to misunderstanding. So then it gets into a comedy of not exactly remarriage, but there's a little romantic comedy subplot. Then circumstances take. Basically, what it is, it's similar to Rushmore in that you have someone who has a lot of big ideas about what he wants to do and how he sees himself, but you can also tell that there's something delusional about it, and especially with the way it all plays out in the reality, it never ever goes to plan, or it's never as glamorous, or it's never as slick and quick as possible. This is the kind of guy that probably saw himself pulling heists and doing grand things, but really the accomplishments he makes are really, they're either trivial or they end up failing in some respects. So that's kind of what the story is. Like I said before, this is the film that launched Wes Anderson's career, both as writer and director. This is also the film that launched Owen Wilson's career as an actor, even though he was also the co-writer of this. In fact, that's kind of that's why I give Owen Wilson some. I know it's very easy to hate on him, but I give him a lot of slack because it was something that he found himself into in playing this role, but really he had aspirations to write and worked with Wes on that regard. So in a strange sort of way, actually in a strange way, Bottle Rocket is not just its own self-contained story, but it also sort of alludes to the story of the creators themselves, because this is a film that had, there was a short film that was made in 1994. It was a no low budget affair. It was made amongst friends. It was just to get practice in filmmaking, and especially for Wes Anderson. The short was shown at Sundance, and nothing really happened with it, but it did get the attention of James L. Brooks, who saw it and saw potential and wanted to kind of mentor them and develop a feature length, or I think the feature was already written, but to help them to develop and to make it a proper production. And so it got produced. It had a $7 million budget, and it it was made and then it was released, and it didn't have a big box office return. It only took in 1 million, so it was definitely a commercial flop. But it did get the attention of critics, and it also got the attention of, I want to say, Jeff Roth, whoever was involved with Disney. It got his attention, and he wanted to make the next Wes Anderson project, and that ended up being Rushmore. So again, this is life imitating art, or art imitating life. Both are kind of one and the same. It's definitely the start of his career, and so any love or hate you can dish out on Wes Anderson, it all starts from this, and then also by extension both Wilson brothers, Luke and Owen, but the other thing I will say that it is unique in Wes Anderson's oeuvre is that you don't have the highly stylized production design as you would from Rushmore onwards. It plays more or less pretty true to life. There isn't a whole lot of additional things. No remodeling of signs. I think there might be in a very mild way, but not in a very overt way. So if one of the things that puts you off with watching a Wes Anderson film is seeing that heavy production design, it's not there. This is probably the closest you're going to get to anything like a real world situation, not a hyper real or a hyper stylized reel as you do with Rushmore onwards. But pretty much everything else with Wes Anderson is still there, particularly with characters having a high ideal of themselves, but then it's greatly contrasted by how it all plays out in real life, and more often than not, they fail to meet even their own ambitions. There's a lot of wit and quirkiness to the dialogue and the way people, and again, having the notion of having a 75-year plan is as if you can somehow map out your entire lifetime ostensibly, and also believing that you can live that long. I don't know if it's 75 years from the current age or just 75 years in general. Which also reminds me, this is very similar to Rushmore in that respect. The connection with The Great Gatsby. This is something that Owen Wilson pointed out in the commentary track for Rushmore, that there's a lot of The Great Gatsby in there, where you have a man who has a certain ambition and has a plan and a desire to go places and to do things, and he sets himself out for it, and then life derails it. Yes, it was John Lennon who said life happens when you make other plans, and yes, this is the same guy who said, "I am the Eggman, I am the Walrus." I love that. Every time that John Lennon is quoted seriously, it's then immediately undercut with "I am the Walrus." So proof you don't take him seriously. But at any rate, so, but yeah, everything else about Wes Anderson is there. The dialogue and the ultimately there's a sympathy and even a love of the characters. You would think that by talking about failure, you think that, oh, this just says, you shouldn't have any dreams. But actually, there's a certain sympathy and warmth. You kind of feel. On the one hand, you kind of wonder, why are you doing this to yourself? This is kind of stupid. But at the same time, you're also rooting for them. You want them to, succeed, even if they end up succeeding either badly or not at all. And that, I think, is really, it's very unusual. And other people who have seen this film and at the time have noted it. fact, Martin Scorsese considered one of his amongst his top 10 films of the 1990s, and it was because there was hardly any cynicism, that it's sympathy, and he compared it to Jean Renoir before The Rules of the Game, where you have these characters that you ultimately feel a certain sympathy for. So again, if you like characters with a certain and misguided ambition, and this is also, I think this is also youth talking. Youth often doesn't know what it wants. It may say it knows what it wants, but it often doesn't. You have that kind of sympathy, and again, it's the overt production design is not there. I mean, that will come through, especially with Rushmore, but this not so much. But everything else is there. This is when Wes Anderson first started working with Robert Yeoman on cinematography, and he's worked with them ever since, with the exception of Fantastic Mr. Fox, but that's not because of any kind of acrimony between the two of them. It's all because of the style of filmmaking. This is stop motion animation, so which is not something that Robert Yeoman is known for doing. So I would probably recommend this as a good mild introduction to Wes Anderson. If you've never seen any of Wes Anderson's films before, it's a fairly good mild introduction. I still stand by Rushmore. That's still my favorite of his, and you definitely get all of it sort of full blown. But Bottle Rocket certainly has its charms as well. So, yeah, sorry, there isn't that much to say about it. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. I mean, there's no real ambiguity to it at all, and so if you like your quirky comedy, but quirky comedy done right, it's not stupid or anything. After all, this was kind of the film that sort of started it all. So in that sense, if you love or hate it, then you either are going to love this or you're going to hate it. But what can you do? And I think the last thing I should mention is that for the longest time, this was the most requested title to be issued by Criterion. And sure enough, it was made, and in fact, it's also available on Blu-ray as well. So there you go. Some dreams can be fulfilled. So again, life imitating art, art imitating life. So there you go. Bottle Rocket. And until next time, take care.